My hands trembled as I adjusted the clasp on my silver bracelet, the one my father gave me before he died. 3 years of double shifts at Miami General. 3 years of paying off medical bills that should have saved him but didn't. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight I was supposed to relax, celebrate Megan's last days of freedom before her wedding. Maybe remember what it felt like to be 26 instead of feeling ancient. Kayla, you look like you're about to bolt. Megan appeared beside me at the Marina Bay Club's crowded bar, her pink sash declaring her bride-to-be status to anyone within 100 yards. She pressed a cocktail into my hand that smelled like pineapple and regret. 1 drink. That's all I'm asking. I'd been working in the ICU for 72 hours straight before this. My scrubs were still in my locker at the hospital. The dress I wore was borrowed from Megan's closet, a cream-colored thing that actually fit me properly for once. I took the drink because refusing would lead to questions I didn't want to answer about why I couldn't afford to buy my own alcohol this week. The club overlooked the marina where dozens of boats bobbed in their slips, masts creating a forest of white against the darkening sky. It was 8 o'clock, and the sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of orange and purple across the water. Music pulsed from inside the club, but out here on the terrace, the sound of waves against hulls provided a gentler rhythm. "I'm not bolting," I said, taking a sip that burned more than I expected. "I'm just tired." "You're always tired." Megan linked her arm through mine, pulling me toward a group of women I vaguely recognized from her engagement party. "That's what happens when you work yourself to death paying off someone else's mistakes." The comment stung because it was true. My father had racked up $80,000 in medical debt during his cancer treatment. Insurance had covered some, but experimental treatments and specialists who promised miracles came with price tags that made me dizzy. He died anyway, 4 years ago this November, and I'd just made the final payment 6 months ago. My mother never forgave me for working during his last days instead of sitting by his bedside. She moved to Oregon shortly after the funeral. We talked maybe once every 3 months. Conversations that felt more like obligations than connections. A commotion near the club's entrance pulled my attention away from Megan's friends and their stories about wedding dresses I'd never afford. 3 men had arrived, and something about them made the crowd part like they carried an invisible force field. They wore dark suits that looked tailored, not rented. The man in the center stood taller than his companions, broad-shouldered, with black hair that caught the terrace lights as he moved. "Oh my God," one of Megan's friends whispered. "That's Franco Versiani." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it, breathless and slightly fearful, made me look more carefully. He had olive skin and dark eyes that swept across the terrace with the kind of assessment that missed nothing. When his gaze landed on our group, I felt it like a physical touch. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, those eyes locked onto mine. Then he looked away, moving toward a private section of the club with his companions. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. "Import-export," Megan's friend said, which was clearly code for something else based on her tone. "He owns half the port and a dozen properties around Miami. My cousin works in his corporate office. She says he's dangerous. Dangerous." The word settled in my chest like a weight. I'd spent 3 years in the ICU seeing what dangerous looked like when it came through the emergency room doors at 3 a.m. Knife wounds, gunshot injuries, overdoses. Whatever Franco Versiani's business involved, I wanted no part of it. I turned back to the water, finishing my drink faster than I should have. The alcohol created a warm buzz that temporarily pushed away the exhaustion living in my bones. When Megan grabbed my arm again an hour later, I'd had 2 more drinks and was feeling almost human. "So," she said, her eyes bright with the kind of excitement that always preceded bad decisions. "Remember how I said we were just doing dinner and drinks?" I narrowed my eyes at her. "Megan, what did you do?" "Jake's friend owns a yacht. Well, his boss owns a yacht. And they invited us for a sunset cruise. Well, technically it's past sunset now, but you know what I mean." "No." The word came out flat. "Absolutely not. It's just a few hours. Look, the boat's right there." She pointed to a massive white yacht docked at the far end of the marina. Even from this distance, I could see it was worth more money than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. There's going to be food and music, and Jake really wants me to meet his boss before the wedding. "Then you go." "I'll get an Uber home." Kayla Wells, you have not taken a single night off in 3 months. I checked with your supervisor. You're coming on this boat, and you're going to have fun if it kills both of us. That's how I found myself walking down the dock at 10:30 at night, my borrowed heels clicking against the wooden planks, following Megan and a dozen other people I barely knew toward a yacht that looked like it should be featured in magazines. The name painted on the stern read Tesoro, and as we got closer, I could see crew members in crisp white uniforms waiting to help us aboard. The last person I expected to see was Franco Versiani standing on the deck, talking with an older man in a captain's uniform. Megan grabbed my wrist. Oh my God! Jake works for him. Jake works for Franco Versiani. Why didn't he tell me that? Because Jake probably had sense enough to know that information would make his fiancée nervous, I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I watched Franco turn as our group approached, watched his eyes scan the new arrivals, and stop when they found me. This time the look lasted longer than 3 seconds. Long enough for me to notice the sharp angles of his face, the way he held himself with absolute confidence, the small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive instead of less. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice carrying easily across the deck. There was the faintest trace of an accent. Italian, maybe, softened by years in America. "Please make yourselves comfortable. We'll be departing shortly." I should have turned around right then. Should have faked sudden illness, or remembered an important work emergency. But Megan's hand was on my arm, and Jake was introducing her to Franco with obvious nervousness. And then somehow I was being handed a glass of champagne by a server who appeared at my elbow like magic. The yacht's interior was all polished wood and cream leather, understated luxury that whispered money rather than shouting it. I found a seat near the windows in the main salon, away from the crowd gathering on the upper deck. Through the glass, I could see storm clouds building on the horizon, dark masses that looked ominous against the last light of evening. "We should wait," I heard someone say. "Weather Service issued a tropical storm warning an hour ago. We'll be back before it hits." Franco's voice, calm and certain. 2 hours, 3 at most. The engines rumbled to life beneath my feet, a deep thrumming that vibrated through the leather seat. I watched Miami's coastline begin to shrink as we moved away from the dock, lights from buildings reflecting off the dark water. Most of the other guests had moved to the upper deck where music played and laughter carried on the breeze. I stayed where I was, content to watch the city disappear and try to remember the last time I'd been on a boat. Maybe 10 years ago, on a college trip to the Keys before my father got sick and everything changed. "You don't like parties." It wasn't a question. Franco Versiani stood in the salon doorway. One hand braced against the frame as the yacht rocked gently through the waves. "I like parties fine," I said, which was a lie. "I'm just tired." "You're always tired." He repeated Megan's words from earlier, which meant he'd been paying more attention than I realized. "That's what happens when you work too hard. You don't know anything about me. I know you're Megan Collins' best friend. I know you work at Miami General as an ICU nurse. I know you took 3 drinks at the bar earlier and looked like you wanted to disappear." He moved further into the salon, not sitting, but leaning against the bar with a casualness that somehow made him seem more dangerous, not less. "I know you don't want to be here." Heat rushed to my face. "If you knew that, why did you let me board?" "Because you came anyway. That interested me." He studied me with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "What's your name?" "Kayla." I didn't offer my last name, though clearly he already knew it. "And you're Franco Versiani, import-export, apparently." A smile touched his lips, brief but genuine. "Apparently. What do you actually do?" "Many things, none of which you need to worry about tonight." He gestured toward the windows where rain had started to spatter against the glass. "We should head back." "You think?" I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "You think maybe we should have stayed at the dock when the Weather Service issued a storm warning?" "Probably." He pushed off from the bar, moving with the yacht's motion like he'd been born at sea. "Stay inside. This could get rough." Rough turned out to be a massive understatement. Within 20 minutes, the gentle rocking became violent, lurching. Wind screamed past the windows, and rain hammered the deck above our heads with enough force that I could barely hear the shouting from the crew. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized as backup systems kicked in. Most of the other guests had retreated inside, faces pale, expensive clothes soaked from their dash down from the upper deck. Megan found me clutching the arm of my seat, knuckles white. "This is bad," she said unnecessarily. "Jake says Franco's ordering everyone to stay inside and buckle in." Buckle in to what? This isn't a car. But the crew was already moving through the salon, showing people how to secure themselves using the yacht's safety restraints. I fumbled with the clips, my hands shaking from adrenaline more than fear. The yacht pitched violently to starboard, and somewhere above us, something crashed with enough force to shake the entire vessel. "The canopy tore off," a crew member shouted to no one in particular. "Everyone stay below deck. Captain's orders." But I'd seen Megan's face when the yacht lurched, seen the way she pressed her hand to her mouth, gone green around the edges. She was going to be sick, and she wouldn't make it to the bathroom in time. "Come on," I said, unclipping my restraints and helping her up. "Fresh air will help. Kayla, they said to stay inside." Fresh air," I repeated, guiding her toward the door that led to the side deck. It was probably the stupidest decision I'd ever made. My judgment dulled by 72 hours without real sleep. But all I could think about was getting Megan away from the table before she threw up in front of Jake's boss, the humiliation that would follow her for years. The door opened to chaos. Wind tore at my hair, my dress. Rain came down in sheets so thick I could barely see the railing 5 feet away. The deck was slick with water, and the yacht pitched at angles that didn't seem possible. I pushed Megan toward the railing, letting her lean over the side while I held onto her arm and the nearest handrail, with every ounce of strength I had. That's when I heard the shout, someone yelling about securing the torn canopy before it caused more damage. That's when 3 crew members rushed past us on the deck, focused on the tangle of metal and fabric whipping in the wind near the bow. That's when the yacht hit a wave that felt more like a wall, rising up and then dropping with stomach-lurching speed. Megan stumbled forward. I grabbed for her, caught her arm, pulled her back from the railing. My heel slipped on the wet deck. I remember the sensation of falling, of my head cracking against the metal railing with a burst of white pain. Then the dark water rushing up to meet me, cold as ice when it closed over my head. The last thing I saw before consciousness faded was Megan's face above me, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear over the roar of the storm. Cold. That was the first sensation that registered when consciousness clawed its way back. Not just cold, but freezing. The kind that made every muscle lock up and refuse to cooperate. I tried to open my eyes and managed only a flutter before bright light stabbed through my skull, igniting the throbbing pain that radiated from my right temple. "Easy." A male voice, low and calm. "Don't move yet. You hit your head pretty hard." Memory came back in fractured pieces. The yacht, the storm, Megan being sick, the deck slippery beneath my feet. Then falling into water so cold it felt like knives against my skin. After that, nothing until now. I forced my eyes open despite the light. The room around me was small but immaculate, all polished wood and brass fixtures. Medical equipment beeped softly to my left. I was lying on what felt like a very expensive bed, covered in blankets that did nothing to stop the shivering that had taken over my entire body. Where am I? My voice came out as a rasp, throat raw like I'd been screaming. The Tesoro's medical suite. The man speaking was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. He wore dark slacks and a button-down shirt. No white coat, but the stethoscope around his neck marked him as medical. "You've been unconscious for about 2 hours. Mild concussion, hypothermia, aspiration of seawater. You're lucky to be alive. 2 hours." I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun violently. The doctor, if that's what he was, pressed a hand gently against my shoulder. I said, "Don't move. Your core temperature is still recovering. We need to monitor you for at least another hour before I'll clear you to go anywhere." "We're back at the dock?" The question came out before I could stop it, stupid and obvious. "We are. Have been for about 90 minutes now." He checked something on the monitor beside the bed. "Your heart rate is elevated but stable. How's the pain in your head?" "Like someone's hitting it with a hammer." I closed my eyes against the overhead light. What happened? After I fell? Mr. Verziani pulled you out of the water. The doctor said it matter-of-factly, like people jumped into hurricane-force seas to save strangers all the time. Dove in without a life vest or safety line. By the time the crew got ropes to both of you, you'd been under for nearly a minute. He kept you above water until they could haul you back aboard. Franco Verziani had saved my life. The information settled into my brain like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the picture I'd been building of the dangerous import-export businessman who owned half of Miami's port. People like that didn't risk their lives for ICU nurses they'd spoken to for maybe 10 minutes total. I need to see Megan. I opened my eyes again, pushing past the nausea that tried to climb my throat. My friend. She was with me when I fell. The bride-to-be is in the salon with her fiancé. She's been asking about you every 15 minutes. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out what looked like a thermal blanket. But you're not going anywhere until we get your temperature up another 2 degrees and I'm satisfied you don't have a brain bleed. I work in the ICU. I know the signs of a brain bleed. I don't have one. Then you'll understand why I'm not taking your word for it. He wrapped the thermal blanket around my shoulders over the regular ones already covering me. Mr. Verziani's orders were very clear. You don't leave this room until I personally clear you. Something about the way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Not threatening exactly, but carrying the weight of authority that expected to be obeyed. I'd heard that tone before in the ICU from surgeons who didn't tolerate arguments. But this felt different. Heavier somehow. Where is he? Franco? Dealing with the aftermath of the storm. 3 of his guests were injured when the canopy tore loose. Minor injuries, but they still require attention. The doctor checked my pupils with a pen light that made me want to throw up. He'll want to speak with you before you leave. Of course he would. I'd fallen off his yacht during a storm he'd been warned about. Liability, lawsuits, all the legal nightmares that came with someone nearly dying on your property. My stomach clenched with a different kind of nausea. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Could barely afford my rent. If Franco Verziani decided to come after me for something, I was finished. The door opened without a knock. Franco stepped into the medical suite looking like he'd been through a war. His dark hair was still damp, pushed back from his face. His white shirt was plastered to his broad frame, the expensive fabric ruined by seawater, and what looked like blood on the sleeve. His eyes, those dark eyes that had unnerved me earlier, found mine immediately. "How is she?" he asked the doctor without looking away from me. "Stable. Mild concussion, some water in the lungs that we've cleared. She'll need to be monitored for the next 24 hours for complications. I'll arrange it." Franco moved closer to the bed, and I became acutely aware of how I must look. Soaking wet. Makeup probably destroyed. Wearing someone else's clothes since mine had been cut off me at some point. "How do you feel, Kayla?" Hearing my name in his mouth sent a strange shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. Like I got hit by a truck. But alive. Which I hear is because of you. Something flickered in his expression. Gone too quickly to identify. You shouldn't have been on the deck. I know. Megan was sick, and I thought fresh air would help. It was stupid. It was brave. Also stupid, but brave. He pulled over a chair and sat, which somehow made him seem larger rather than smaller. "The crew should have stopped you. They didn't. That's on me. I'm an adult who made a bad decision. Not your fault. Everything that happens on my yacht is my fault." He said it with the kind of certainty that left no room for argument. "Dr. Martinez, give us a moment." The doctor looked like he wanted to protest, but didn't. He left with one warning glance at me that clearly said, "Don't try to leave." The door closed, leaving me alone with Franco Verziani in a room that suddenly felt much smaller. There were 2 men on the yacht tonight. Franco said without preamble, guests of one of Jake's colleagues. They weren't invited by me. I had no idea where he was going with this. "Okay?" They were photographing people as they boarded. "Including you." He pulled out a phone from his pocket, the screen cracked but still functional, and showed me an image. It was me, climbing aboard the Tesoro, Megan beside me. The angle suggested it had been taken from a distance with a zoom lens. "I don't understand. Those men work for a cartel, Mexican organization that's been trying to muscle into Miami's port operations for the past year." He swiped to another image. This one showed me on the deck just before I fell. Megan beside me. They saw me jump in after you. That makes you important to them. The room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Important how? Important enough to use as leverage against me if they think you matter. He pocketed the phone. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what happened tonight wasn't just an accident. You were being watched, cataloged, assessed. And now that they've seen me risk my life to save yours, they're going to assume you're valuable. But I'm not. I'm nobody. I barely know you. They don't know that. All they know is what they saw. He leaned forward slightly, and I caught a scent underneath the seawater smell. Something woody and expensive. I need you to trust me for the next few hours. Can you do that? Every instinct I had screamed no. Don't trust the dangerous man with the cracked phone showing surveillance photos. Don't get involved in cartel business and port operations and whatever illegal empire he'd built. Run as far and as fast as possible. But my head hurt too much to run. My body was still shaking from cold. And somewhere in the logical part of my brain that had kept me alive through 4 years of paying off impossible debt, I understood that if what he said was true, running wouldn't help. These people already had my picture, already knew my face. What do you want me to do? I asked finally. Come with me. Let me take you somewhere safe while I handle this situation. My apartment is safe. Your apartment was broken into 3 hours ago. He delivered the news like he was commenting on the weather. My security team discovered it when they went to check on the address listed in Jake's employment files. Someone installed listening devices in your living room and bedroom. The world tilted sideways. That's not possible. How would they even know where I live? Your car is registered to your address. You drove to the Marina Bay Club tonight and parked in the public lot. All it takes is running your plates. He stood, pacing to the window that showed the dark marina outside. The devices were installed within the past week based on the model. They've been listening to you, learning your patterns, preparing. For what? I'm an ICU nurse. I work, I sleep, I pay bills. There's nothing to prepare for. There is now. He turned back to face me, and in the dim light of the medical suite, he looked almost haunted. Because you got on my yacht. Because you fell into the ocean during a storm. Because I went in after you instead of letting the crew handle it. Every decision has consequences, Kayla. Sometimes the consequences land on people who don't deserve them. I wanted to scream that this wasn't fair. That I'd done nothing to deserve being dragged into whatever war Franco Versiani was fighting with Mexican cartels. That all I'd wanted was one night off from the crushing weight of existence. And instead, I got hypothermia and surveillance and listening devices in my bedroom. But fair had stopped being relevant the day my father got diagnosed with cancer that insurance wouldn't fully cover. Fair was a luxury for people who could afford it. Where would you take me? I asked instead. I own a building in the financial district. There's a secure apartment on the 10th floor with 24-hour surveillance and guards who know what they're doing. You'd stay there while I clean up this mess. For how long? As long as it takes. He moved back to the chair, sitting so we were almost eye level. I know what you're thinking. That this is insane. That I'm insane. That you should tell me to go to hell and take your chances on your own. He was right. That was exactly what I was thinking. But here's what I need you to understand. He continued, voice dropping lower. The people who took those photos, who bugged your apartment, who are watching you right now, probably from somewhere in this marina, they don't make mistakes. They don't give second chances. If they think you matter to me, they'll use that. And the methods they use to extract information from people are not pleasant. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to keep you alive. The intensity in his voice cut through my defenses like a blade. I've seen what these people do to leverage. I've seen the bodies they leave behind when they're done getting what they want. I will not let that happen to you because of a decision I made to go after a woman falling off my yacht. So this is guilt? You feel responsible? Yes. No hesitation. Completely responsible. You were on my yacht, at my party, in danger because I ignored weather warnings. Whatever happens next is my fault, which means fixing it is my responsibility. I studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda that had to be there. But all I saw was exhaustion, and something that looked uncomfortably like genuine concern. My friend Megan, I said slowly. Is she in danger too? No. She left with Jake 20 minutes ago. The cartel has no interest in her. She's nobody's leverage. Unlike me, apparently. The invisible trophy in a game I didn't know I was playing. I need to see her before I go anywhere. I need to tell her I'm okay. Franco pulled out his phone again, this time making a call. Bring Megan Collins back to the yacht. Tell her Kayla is awake and asking for her. He hung up. She'll be here in 10 minutes. Jake lives 3 blocks from the marina. You really do control everything, don't you? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I try. Doesn't always work, as tonight demonstrated. Dr. Martinez returned, checking my vitals again, and declaring that my temperature had risen to acceptable levels. I was still hypothermic by medical standards, but no longer in immediate danger. He prescribed rest, warmth, and monitoring for signs of complications. Then he looked at Franco. She should be in a hospital. She'll have better care where I'm taking her. You'll be on call? Always am. The doctor gathered his equipment. Call me if anything changes. Confusion, vomiting, severe headache beyond what she has now. Any of those could indicate bleeding. They were talking about me like I wasn't there, which should have bothered me more than it did. But the exhaustion was catching up, dragging at my limbs with weights I couldn't shake off. Megan burst through the door before Dr. Martinez could leave, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She practically threw herself at the bed, grabbing my hand like she was afraid I'd disappear. Oh my God, Kayla. Oh my God, I thought you were dead. I saw you go over and I screamed, but the crew was already running, and then Franco just dove in without even thinking, and I thought you were both going to drown. The words came out in a rush, barely pausing for breath. I'm okay, I lied, squeezing her hand. Headache, cold, but okay. This is my fault. I made you come. I made you get on that stupid boat. You didn't make the storm come. You didn't make me go on deck when they told us to stay inside. This was just a bad decision I made. Megan's eyes cut to Franco, who had moved back to the window to give us space. Jake told me who he really is, what he really does, and I don't know what to think. She lowered her voice even though Franco could definitely still hear. He saved your life. But the things Jake said, about the business, about the people he works with, Kayla, this is dangerous. I know. So come home with me. We'll go to my place. You can stay there until this blows over. It's not going to blow over. I pulled my hand from hers gently. My apartment was bugged. People are watching me because they think I matter to him. I gestured toward Franco without looking at him. Running to your place just puts you in danger too. Then we go to the police. And tell them what? That a man I can't prove exists photographed me getting on a yacht? That someone broke into my apartment and I have no evidence? The police can't help with this, Meg. She looked like she wanted to argue. But Jake appeared in the doorway behind her, his expression grave. He exchanged a look with Franco that communicated something I couldn't interpret. We need to go, Jake said quietly to Megan. Now. I'm not leaving her. You are. Franco's voice cut through the room with absolute authority. Because staying puts both of you at risk. Kayla will be protected. You won't be unless you're far away from this situation. Megan's face crumpled. This isn't fair. No, I agreed. But since when has anything been fair? She hugged me hard, whispered that she loved me and to please be careful. And then Jake was pulling her away. The door closed behind them. And I was alone again with Franco Verciani, and the mess my life had become in the span of 6 hours. The car is waiting, Franco said. Can you walk? I pushed back the blankets and immediately regretted it as cold air hit my skin. Someone had dressed me in sweatpants and a hoodie, both several sizes too large. My borrowed dress was gone, probably ruined. I can walk. He moved to my side, offering his arm. I took it because standing up proved more difficult than I'd expected, my legs shaky and unreliable. We made our way slowly through the yacht, through corridors I didn't remember from earlier. Crew members nodded respectfully as we passed, their faces carefully neutral. On the dock, a black SUV waited with tinted windows and a driver who looked more like a soldier than a chauffeur. Franco helped me into the back seat, then climbed in beside me. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded too much like a cage locking. As we pulled away from the marina, I watched the Tesoro shrink in the side mirror. Somewhere on that yacht, I'd fallen into dark water and nearly died. Somewhere on those docks, people were watching with cameras and bad intentions. And here I was, driving into the Miami night with a man I barely knew, trusting him because the alternative was worse. The city lights blurred past the window, familiar streets made strange by circumstance. I pressed my fingers against the cool glass and tried to remember what my life had looked like 12 hours ago. Simple, exhausting, safe, that life was gone now, drowned in the same water that had nearly taken me. Whatever came next, whoever I became on the other side of this, she wouldn't be the same woman who'd reluctantly agreed to a bachelorette party. She'd be someone who survived. The apartment was nothing like what I'd expected. When Franco said secure building in the financial district, I'd pictured something cold and impersonal, maybe a hotel room with better locks. Instead, the elevator opened directly into a space that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Miami, the city sprawling out in a carpet of lights that made the ocean beyond look impossibly dark. Hardwood floors, cream-colored furniture that was somehow both modern and comfortable. A kitchen with appliances I'd only seen in cooking shows. Even exhausted and still shivering from the after-effects of hypothermia, I could recognize wealth when it surrounded me. "The bedroom is through there," Franco said, gesturing to a doorway on the left. "Bathroom has a soaking tub if you want to warm up. There's a security panel by the front door, already programmed with the current codes. Don't open it for anyone unless you've verified through the camera feed first." I stood in the middle of the living room, dripping on his expensive floors, trying to process how my life had gone from routine ICU shifts to this in less than 12 hours. The concussion wasn't helping. Every time I moved my head too quickly, the room tilted at angles that made my stomach lurch. "You should sleep," Franco continued, moving to the kitchen and pulling a bottle of water from the refrigerator. He handed it to me along with 2 pills from a prescription bottle he'd retrieved from a cabinet. Pain medication. Dr. Martinez prescribed them for the headache. I took them because the throbbing in my skull had progressed from manageable to nearly unbearable. "Where will you be?" "Here. On the couch." He removed his jacket, the ruined white shirt underneath still damp with seawater. "I'm not leaving you alone tonight. Doctor's orders and common sense. I'm a nurse. I can monitor myself for concussion symptoms. Then you'll understand why I'm staying anyway." He loosened his collar, revealing a throat marked with salt lines and what looked like the beginning of a bruise. "Go. Take a bath, get warm, sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." I wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. The bedroom was as luxurious as the living area, with a king-size bed that had too many pillows and sheets that felt like silk when I touched them. The bathroom attached to it was larger than my entire kitchen back home. The soaking tub Franco mentioned could easily fit 2 people, surrounded by white marble and chrome fixtures that gleamed under recessed lighting. I started the water running hot, steam immediately fogging the mirror. While it filled, I peeled off the borrowed sweatpants and hoodie, catching sight of myself in the mirror as the fog cleared slightly. Bruises were already forming along my ribs where I'd hit the railing before falling. My right temple sported a spectacular purple-black mark that would take weeks to fade. I looked like I'd been in a fight and lost badly. The hot water stung at first, then became almost unbearably perfect as I sank into it. Heat seeped into my bones, chasing away the lingering cold that had settled there. I closed my eyes and tried to think about nothing, but images kept flooding back. The storm, the deck slippery beneath my feet, Franco's face when he'd shown me those surveillance photos, my apartment, bugged with devices I'd never suspected, someone listening to me for a week, learning my patterns, preparing to use me as leverage in a war I didn't understand. A soft knock on the bathroom door made me jump, sloshing water over the side of the tub. "I'm leaving clean clothes outside the door," Franco's voice carried through the wood. "And your phone. I had my tech team sweep it for tracking software. Did they find any?" A pause. Yes, of course they had. I sank deeper into the water until it covered my ears, muffling the world. When I finally emerged, I felt marginally more human. The clothes Franco left were men's sweats, soft cotton that smelled like expensive laundry detergent. They were several sizes too large, but I didn't care. They were clean and dry and warm. My phone sat on the dresser, its familiar case somehow reassuring despite what Franco had said about tracking software. I picked it up with shaking fingers and saw 17 missed calls. 12 from Megan, 3 from my supervisor at the hospital, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, and 1 notification that made my blood run cold. A text message from an unknown number, sent an hour ago. Beautiful apartment. Enjoy it while you can. The phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a crack that might have been the screen breaking or might have been my heart. I stood frozen, staring at it like it had turned into a snake. They knew. Whoever had bugged my apartment, whoever was watching, they knew where I was right now. Franco. My voice came out as a whisper, too quiet to carry through the closed door. I tried again, louder. Franco. The bedroom door burst open. He had a gun in his hand, materializing from nowhere, his entire body coiled with tension ready to explode into violence. When he saw no immediate threat, just me standing by the dresser, some of that tension released. But the gun didn't disappear. What's wrong? I pointed at my phone on the floor, unable to make my mouth form the words. Franco picked it up, read the screen, and his expression turned to something carved from ice. When did this come in? An hour ago. I just saw it now. He pulled out his own phone, making a call while still staring at mine. Someone got through the security perimeter, text message to Kayla's number 15 minutes after we arrived. He listened for a moment. I don't care how good their tech is. Find the breach and shut it down. Now. He ended the call and looked at me. Really looked. And whatever he saw in my face made him set both phones aside and move closer. Kayla, listen to me. This building has security that most government facilities would envy. The message is intimidation, nothing more. They can't get to you here. They knew where I was within 15 minutes of arriving. That's not intimidation. That's a demonstration. You're right. He didn't try to sugarcoat it, which I appreciated more than I wanted to admit. It's a demonstration that they have resources. But resources aren't the same as access. Getting a message through is one thing. Getting a person through is something else entirely. How can you be sure? Because if they could get to you, they would have already. Messages are what people send when they can't do anything else. He gestured toward the bed. Sit down before you fall down. You're swaying. I was. The adrenaline from seeing the text had temporarily overridden my exhaustion, but now it was crashing back twice as hard. I sat on the edge of the bed, and Franco took a position by the window where he could see both me and the door. The gun had disappeared somewhere, but I had no doubt he could produce it again in seconds if needed. Tell me about them, I said. The cartel. Who they are. What they want. All of it. You don't need to know that. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't treat me like I'm fragile or stupid. Someone is threatening me because of you, which means I deserve to know exactly what I'm dealing with. All of it, Franco. No more half-truths. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. The Cartel de Sinaloa has been trying to move into Miami's port operations for 2 years. I control most of the shipping routes through the commercial port, which means anything coming in from Mexico has to go through channels I monitor. They want that control. Started with offers to buy me out, then moved to threats, and recently escalated to violence. Violence how? 3 of my warehouses have burned in the past 6 months. 2 of my ship captains were killed in what police ruled as unrelated accidents. Last month, someone took a shot at my car. Missed me, hit my driver instead. His voice remained flat, emotionless, reciting facts. He survived but won't walk again. I thought about Jake, Megan's fiancé, working for this man in this world. And you can't just give them what they want? I could. If I wanted to hand over control of routes that bring in 40% of Miami's legitimate import business, not to mention shut down the monitoring system that occasionally catches illegal shipments trying to slip through. The cartel doesn't just want access. They want free access, no oversight, no questions asked. So you're what? The good guy in this scenario? A bitter laugh escaped him. There are no good guys here, Kayla. Just degrees of bad. I'm not law enforcement. I don't run a charity. The businesses I control make money, A lot of it, and not all that money is clean. But I draw lines that others don't. Human trafficking doesn't go through my ports. Certain types of weapons don't go through my ports. I report what needs reporting, and look the other way on what doesn't. It's a balance, and it works. Until it doesn't. Until it doesn't, he agreed. And you fell into the middle of that imbalance tonight. The room felt smaller suddenly. The luxury surrounding me revealed as exactly what Franco had called it earlier. A cage. Gilded and comfortable, but still a cage. My mother, I said, remembering the text I'd seen from Franco's phone in the yacht's medical suite. You said you were putting protection on her. How? Discreet surveillance. Former military personnel who know how to stay invisible. She won't know they're there, but if anyone approaches her with ill intent, they'll be stopped. Define stopped. Detained and questioned, then turned over to local law enforcement if they're stupid enough to push it. He moved away from the window, sitting in a chair across from the bed. Your mother lives in Eugene, Oregon, works as a librarian, goes to the same coffee shop every morning before her shift, takes a yoga class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, has a standing dinner with her book club the first Friday of every month. The casual recitation of my mother's life made my skin crawl. How long have you known that? Since I ran background on everyone connected to the yacht tonight. The minute I knew you were targeted, I needed to know who else could be used as leverage. Standard protocol. There's nothing standard about having someone investigate my family without my knowledge. No, he admitted. But it kept your mother alive and safe while you were unconscious from a head injury, so I'll take your anger over her being kidnapped. He had a point, much as I hated to acknowledge it. What about Megan? Clean. No surveillance on her, no threats, no indication they consider her valuable beyond the fact that she's your friend. Jake's employment with my organization is public record, nothing classified. She's safe. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them. The painkillers were starting to work, dulling the sharp edges of my headache into something more manageable. Or maybe it was exhaustion finally winning the battle. How long do I have to stay here? Until I neutralize the threat. Could be days. Could be weeks. I have a job. Patients who depend on me. Bills that won't pay themselves. Your supervisor at Miami General has been notified that you're taking medical leave due to the concussion. Paid leave. Your bills will be covered through a corporate account set up in your name. I lifted my head, staring at him. You can't just take over my life like this. I already have. No apology in his voice, just statement of fact. Someone bugged your home, tracked your phone, and sent you a threatening message within an hour of you entering protective custody. Your life as it was doesn't exist anymore, Kayla. Not until this is resolved. You can be angry about that, and I'll understand. But it doesn't change reality. I should hate you for this. Probably. He stood, moving toward the door. But hate me from behind locked doors in a secure building, not from a coffin because you insisted on going home and making yourself an easy target. The words landed like a punch, brutal and effective. He was at the door when I spoke again. Franco, he turned. Thank you. For pulling me out of the water. For this. I gestured vaguely at the apartment. For protecting my mother. Even if I don't like how you did it. Thank you for doing it. Something in his expression softened. Just a fraction. Get some sleep. I'll be right outside if you need anything. The door closed behind him, and I was alone in the enormous bedroom, with its silk sheets and city view, and the knowledge that outside these walls, someone wanted to hurt me to get to a man I barely knew. I lay back against pillows that cost more than my monthly rent, and stared at the ceiling, trying to remember what normal felt like. Sleep came eventually, dragging me under despite the fear and anger and confusion swirling through my mind. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and for 3 blissful seconds, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. Then I moved, and the pain in my head and the bruises on my ribs reminded me otherwise. This was real. All of it. I found Franco asleep on the couch exactly where he'd said he'd be, still dressed in his ruined clothes from the night before. His phone was clutched in one hand, the gun I'd seen earlier resting on the coffee table within easy reach. Even unconscious, he looked dangerous, like a predator between hunts. I stood in the doorway watching him sleep, and wondered how someone could make me feel both safer and more frightened at the same time. My own phone showed it was just past 8 in the morning. 4 days until I was supposed to work my next shift. An entire life waiting for me outside these walls, inaccessible now because of a single bad decision to walk onto a deck during a storm. The injustice of it burned in my chest, hot and bitter. A soft chime came from the security panel by the door, and Franco was awake instantly, gun in hand before I could blink. He checked the screen showing the hallway camera feed, then relaxed marginally. "Breakfast delivery," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Stay back." I watched as he verified the delivery person through multiple cameras, checked their identification against a list on his phone, and only then opened the door enough to accept several bags of food. The entire process took less than 3 minutes, but the level of paranoia involved made my stomach clench. Is this what it's going to be like? Treating everyone like a potential threat? Until proven otherwise, yes. He set the bags on the kitchen counter, removing containers that smelled incredible despite everything. You can resent the precautions, or you can eat the food. I'd suggest both are possible simultaneously. The food was from somewhere expensive based on the presentation alone. Eggs perfectly cooked, bacon that actually looked like meat instead of charcoal, pastries that made my mouth water. I ate because my body demanded fuel, not because I could taste any of it. Franco ate mechanically, checking his phone between bites, firing off messages to people I couldn't see. "What happens today?" I asked. "Today, you rest and recover from the concussion. Tomorrow we assess the situation and adjust as needed." He looked up from his phone. "I have meetings I can't miss, but there will be security here at all times. 2 men in the hallway, 1 monitoring camera feeds from a central location. You won't see them unless there's a problem. More people knowing where I am, more potential security breaches. These are people I trust with my life. They'll protect you with theirs if necessary." He stood, gathering his phone and gun. "I need to go home, change, handle some business. I'll be back by tonight." Panic flared unexpectedly. "You're leaving me alone?" "You won't be alone. I told you. Security will be here." He moved closer, and I caught that woody scent again underneath the salt and seawater. "I'll show you how to use the security system before I go. You'll be able to see every entrance to the building, every floor, every hallway. Nothing happens here that you won't know about." True to his word, he spent 20 minutes walking me through the security panel, showing me camera angles and alarm triggers and emergency protocols. By the time he finished, I could probably run surveillance on a small country. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with that heavy thunk that sounded like finality. I stood in the center of the living room and felt more alone than I had since my father died. The apartment was beautiful, the security was sophisticated, the city spread out beyond the windows like a promise, but none of it changed the fact that I was a prisoner, however comfortable the prison. Someone out there wanted to use me as a weapon against Franco Versiani, and until that threat disappeared, my life belonged to someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Please tell me you're okay. Jake won't tell me anything and I'm losing my mind." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'm safe. Can't explain details right now, but I promise I'm okay. I'll call when I can." The lie felt necessary. She didn't need to know about the threatening text or the security team, or the fact that I was living in a gilded cage while cartels played chess with human lives. She needed to believe I was fine, so she could enjoy the last weeks before her wedding, without drowning in worry. 3 more days passed in a blur of expensive meals delivered by screened personnel, video calls with Dr. Martinez monitoring my concussion recovery, and long hours staring at the city below while Franco's security team lurked invisibly in the hallways. Franco himself came and went at odd hours, sometimes staying overnight on the couch, sometimes disappearing for 18 hours at a stretch. He didn't explain his absences, and I didn't ask. The less I knew about whatever war he was fighting, the better I could maintain the illusion that I was just a temporary casualty, not a permanent participant. On the 4th morning, I woke to find Franco sitting in the chair by the window, watching sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. When he noticed I was awake, he held up his phone. "We found the source of the text message," he said without preamble. "Traced it back to a phone purchased with a fake ID at a store near the port. The store's security footage shows the buyer. He turned the phone so I could see the screen. The image was grainy but clear enough. A man, maybe 35, with a forgettable face and a baseball cap pulled low. He could have been anyone, which was probably the point. Do you know him? One of Sinaloa's lower-level operatives. Not important enough to matter, which is why they used him for this task. Franco pocketed the phone, but we also tracked him to a location where he's been staying, and that location led us to something more useful. What? Confirmation that you're not the only leverage they're pursuing. They've been watching 3 other people connected to my organization, planning something larger than just pressure tactics. He stood, moving to the window, which means they're preparing for a major move, probably within the next few weeks. And what does that mean for me? He turned, and the expression on his face made something cold settle in my stomach. It means things are going to get worse before they get better. And it means I'm moving you somewhere more secure than this apartment. Somewhere they won't think to look even if they compromise every security measure I have in the city. Where? Somewhere safe. He wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it, which told me everything I needed to know. Nowhere was safe. Not really. Not when I'd become a playing piece in a game where the penalty for losing wasn't points or money, but blood. The restaurant was called Lucia's, tucked into a quiet street in Little Havana where tourists rarely wandered. Franco had insisted on taking me out despite my protests about being seen in public. His reasoning was simple and terrifying in its logic. If I never left the apartment, if I lived like I was already captured, then the cartel had won without firing a shot. Better to move through the city under controlled conditions than to prove I could be caged. I wore a green dress that had appeared in the apartment's closet sometime during the past week, along with 6 other items in exactly my size. I'd stopped asking where they came from. The dress was simple but elegant, hitting just above my knees, the fabric soft against skin that had finally stopped feeling perpetually cold. My bruises had faded to yellow-green shadows, and the concussion symptoms had largely disappeared under Dr. Martinez's watchful monitoring. Franco sat across from me at a corner table where he could see both the entrance and the kitchen. 2 of his security team occupied a table near the door, dressed casually but alert in a way that made them stand out to anyone who knew what to look for. A 3rd was positioned somewhere outside. I'd learned to recognize the patterns of protection surrounding Franco's movements, learned to see the invisible walls he built around himself everywhere he went. "You're not eating," Franco observed, gesturing to my untouched plate of ropa vieja that smelled incredible, but might as well have been cardboard for all I could taste it. "I'm not hungry. You need to eat. Dr. Martinez said your weight has dropped since the accident. Maybe that's what happens when you upend someone's entire life and expect them to just accept it." The words came out sharper than intended, but I was past caring about politeness. 2 months of living in that apartment, 2 months of security teams and controlled movements and carefully monitored phone calls had worn my patience down to nothing. Franco set down his fork with deliberate care. "Would you prefer I had left you in your apartment? Let them take you in the middle of the night and use whatever methods they deemed necessary to extract information about me? I'd prefer to have some say in my own life. Some agency beyond choosing what color dress to wear from a closet full of clothes I never asked for." "Fair enough." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those dark eyes that saw too much. "What do you want, Kayla? Specifically." The question caught me off guard. "What?" "You want agency, control over your life. Define what that looks like in practical terms given the circumstances we're both trapped in." I stared at him, searching for the trap in the question, the manipulation hiding beneath apparent openness, but his expression remained neutral, genuinely waiting for an answer. "I want to understand what's actually happening, not just bits and pieces you decide I need to know, but the whole picture, who these people are, what they want, what you're doing to stop them." I leaned forward. "And I want to know about you. Really know, not just the surface details about port operations and import-export businesses. I want to know who Franco Verciani actually is beneath all the security teams and carefully controlled image." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or wariness. That's a dangerous thing to ask for. I think I'm already in about as much danger as possible. What's a little more truth going to cost me? He considered this for a long moment, then signaled to the waiter for wine. When 2 glasses arrived, deep red that caught the restaurant's low lighting like liquid ruby, He took a long drink before speaking. My grandfather, Luca Versiani, came to Miami from Naples in 1967 with $300 and a dream of building something legitimate. He worked the docks for 15 years, saved every penny, learned the business from the bottom up. In 1982, he bought his first warehouse. By 1990, he owned 6 and had contracts with most of the major shipping companies moving goods through Miami's port. Franco's voice had taken on a different quality, softer somehow, like he was telling a story he'd heard so many times it had worn grooves in his memory. My father, Antonio, inherited all of it when Luca died in 1995, and my father was not my grandfather. Where Luca built with patience and integrity, Antonio saw opportunities for faster money. He made deals with people Luca would have thrown out of his office. By 2000, half the Vertiani operations were compromised by organized crime connections. By 2005, the legitimate businesses were barely breaking even because Antonio had leveraged everything to fund his other ventures. What kind of ventures? The kind that paid well but extracted costs in other ways. Money laundering through shipping containers, protection rackets for smaller businesses operating in port territory, facilitating imports that customs didn't need to know about. Franco's jaw tightened. My father died in 2008, heart attack at 53. By then, I'd been working in the business for 6 years, watching him destroy everything my grandfather built. How old were you when you took over? 26. Same age you are now. He finished his wine and poured another glass. I inherited an empire drowning in debt, with connections to 3 different criminal organizations, and a reputation that made legitimate businesses refuse to work with us. It took me 5 years just to stabilize operations. Another 3 to start slowly cutting ties with the worst elements. And now, 10 years after taking control, I'm still fighting wars my father started. The bitterness in his voice was raw and honest in a way that made something in my chest tighten. This wasn't the controlled, dangerous man who'd pulled me from the ocean. This was someone carrying weights I couldn't fully comprehend. The Cartel de Sinaloa, I said. When did they enter the picture? 2 years ago. They'd been operating in Texas and California but wanted eastern routes. Miami made sense geographically. They approached me with offers first. Partnership arrangements that would have made both sides wealthy. I refused because I knew what partnership meant. Eventually they'd want more control, then total control, and by then I'd be complicit in operations I'd spent years trying to eliminate from my businesses. So you started a war. I chose not to surrender. They interpreted that as war. He met my eyes directly. I'm not claiming to be a good man, Kayla. I've made choices that would horrify you if you knew the details. But I draw lines. Human trafficking doesn't happen through my ports. Certain weapons don't move through my territory. Children don't become casualties of business decisions I make. Those are my lines, and I don't cross them regardless of profit involved. And the cartel doesn't share those values. The cartel doesn't have values beyond profit and power, which makes them dangerous in ways I can't fully control. He paused as the waiter cleared our barely touched plates and brought espresso neither of us had ordered. When we were alone again, Franco continued. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications suggesting they're planning something larger than pressure tactics. They're bringing in operatives from Mexico, at least 8 that we've identified. That level of personnel means they're preparing for a significant move. Fear crawled up my spine like ice water. A move against you, against my operations, against people I'm connected to, against vulnerabilities they think they've identified. His eyes held mine. Against you? If they think you're valuable leverage. But I'm not. I barely know you. A few dinners, some conversations. That's not leverage worth pursuing. You don't understand how these people think. They saw me dive into a hurricane to pull you out of the water. That action communicated value regardless of the reality underneath it. In their assessment, I wouldn't risk my life for someone who didn't matter. He leaned forward. And they're not entirely wrong. The admission hung between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. What do you mean? I mean that over the past 2 months, despite the circumstances, despite the danger and the complications, I've come to value your presence in ways that have nothing to do with guilt or responsibility. He spoke carefully, choosing each word with precision. You challenge me. You ask questions no one else dares to ask. You see through the walls I've built and refuse to be intimidated by the darkness you find there. That's rare. That matters. My heart was doing complicated things in my chest, rhythms that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the intensity in his voice, the vulnerability hidden beneath layers of control. Franco, this is insane. You can't have feelings for someone you've known for 2 months in the middle of a crisis situation. That's not real. That's just proximity and adrenaline and trauma bonding. You think I don't know that? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You think I haven't analyzed this from every angle, looking for the psychological explanation that makes it logical and dismissible? But knowing all the reasons why it doesn't make sense doesn't change the reality of it. I care about you, Kayla. Not as guilt, not as responsibility, as something more complicated that I don't have a name for yet. This is Stockholm Syndrome, or some version of it. I'm dependent on you for safety, for basic needs. My judgment is compromised. Maybe. He didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. Or maybe we're two people who found something real in impossible circumstances. Maybe both things are true simultaneously. But denying it doesn't make it disappear. I wanted to argue, to throw logic and reason at this admission until it shattered into pieces I could dismiss. But sitting across from him in the warm glow of Lucia's restaurant, with his security team creating invisible walls around us and the weight of confessions filling the space between us, I couldn't find the words, because some traitorous part of me recognized the truth in what he said. Over the past 2 months, Franco had become more than my protector or captor or whatever label I tried to apply. He'd become someone whose presence made the apartment feel less like a prison. Someone whose rare smiles felt like victories. Someone I looked for when I woke in the morning and missed when hours passed without seeing him. I don't know what to do with this, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Neither do I. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine, asking permission without words. After a moment's hesitation, I closed the distance, letting my fingers brush against his. The contact sent electricity through my nervous system, warm and dangerous and impossible to ignore. We shouldn't, I said, even as my hand remained in his. Probably not. This will end badly. Most things do. Despite everything, despite the fear and confusion and the absolute insanity of the situation, I laughed. The sound surprised both of us, breaking tension like a physical snap. You're terrible at reassurance. I've never pretended otherwise. His thumb traced patterns against my palm, small circles that made it difficult to think straight. But I'm excellent at protection, at strategy, at keeping people alive when others want them dead. That's what you get with me, Kayla. Honesty, safety, and absolutely no false promises about happy endings. That's possibly the most depressing romantic statement I've ever heard. Romance requires illusion. I deal in reality. He squeezed my hand gently before releasing it. But within that reality, I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, to give you back your life as soon as possible, and to make sure that when this is over, you have choices about what comes next. What if one of those choices is walking away from you completely? Something dark flashed across his expression, pain quickly masked. Then I'll arrange the best security money can buy to make sure you stay safe after you're gone, and I'll accept that some things aren't meant to be kept no matter how much we want them. The honesty in his voice broke something open in my chest. This was real. Whatever was happening between us, beneath all the complications and impossible circumstances, this was genuine. Franco Verciani, dangerous businessman with blood on his hands and shadows in his past, had somehow become important to me in ways I couldn't rationalize or dismiss. I need time, I said, to process all of this, to figure out what I'm actually feeling versus what's just survival instinct and trauma response. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere until the threat is neutralized. The drive back to the apartment was quiet, but the silence felt different now. Less like walls between us and more like space to breathe. Franco's hand rested on the seat between us, close enough that I could feel his warmth without actually touching. An invitation, not a demand. By the time we reached the building's secure parking garage, I'd made a decision that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. When Franco walked me to the apartment door, I didn't immediately go inside. Instead, I turned to face him in the hallway's dim lighting. Stay tonight. Not on the couch. Not as my bodyguard. Just stay. His expression revealed nothing, but I saw his hands tighten slightly at his sides. Kayla, you're vulnerable right now. I won't take advantage of that. I'm not asking you to take advantage. I'm asking you to stop treating me like I'm too fragile to make my own decisions. I stepped closer. You said I could have agency. This is me exercising it. Stay. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right. But we're taking this slow. No assumptions, no expectations beyond whatever feels right in the moment. Agreed. Inside the apartment, with the door locked and the city glittering beyond the windows, something shifted between us. Franco removed his jacket, loosened his tie, became marginally less the dangerous businessman, and more just a man with exhaustion in his eyes and the weight of impossible choices on his shoulders. We talked until past midnight, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like tentative strangers learning each other's languages. He told me about his childhood in Miami, raised between his grandfather's integrity and his father's corruption, never quite belonging to either world. About his mother who'd died when he was 16, a quiet woman who'd loved books and gardens and couldn't reconcile the man she'd married with the man her husband became. I told him about my father's slow death, the crushing weight of debt, the anger I still carried toward my mother for leaving instead of fighting through the grief with me, about dreams of medical school I'd abandoned for practical nursing, because debt made ambition a luxury, about feeling invisible most of my life until falling into dark water made me suddenly, terrifyingly visible. When exhaustion finally won, and I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer, Franco walked me to the bedroom door and stopped. Thank you, he said simply, for listening, for trusting me with this, for being brave in ways I'm not sure I deserve. You dove into a hurricane for me. I think you've earned at least one night of honest conversation. Still, he brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture gentle despite the calluses I felt against my cheek. Sleep well, Kayla. I'll be right outside if you need anything. You could stay in here. Just to sleep. Nothing else. He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head. Not yet. When that happens, I want it to be without question, without the shadow of obligation or circumstance forcing the choice. Ask me again when this is over and you have your freedom back. If you still want me then, I'll stay. It was the right decision. I knew that even as disappointment curled through me, but knowing he was right didn't make watching him walk away any easier. I lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of him settling on the couch, the apartment creaking gently around us, the city humming its endless song beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, people wanted to hurt me to get to him. Somewhere in the complicated machinery of criminal enterprise and territorial wars, I'd become a piece on a board I didn't understand. But in this moment, in this expensive cage with its silk sheets and security systems, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous. Ill-advised. Probably doomed hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from the worst night of my life. The property sat 90 miles north of Miami, accessible only by a winding private road that cut through palmetto scrub and pine forest. Franco's cousin Joseph had inherited the land from their grandfather, the same Luca Verciani, who'd built an empire from nothing. The house itself was modest compared to the financial district apartment, a sprawling single-story structure with wide porches and windows that let in light from every direction. It's not what I expected, I said as we pulled up the gravel drive. I'd imagined something fortress-like, all concrete and security systems. Instead, the place looked almost peaceful, like somewhere a family might vacation rather than hide from cartel assassins. That's the point, Franco replied, killing the engine. No one would think to look for you here. It's registered under a shell company with no obvious connection to Verciani interests. As far as public record shows, this property belongs to a retired accountant from Jacksonville. 2 security personnel had followed us in a separate vehicle, maintaining a careful distance during the drive. They'd swept the property yesterday, Franco explained, checking for surveillance devices or signs of compromise. The house had been empty for months, used occasionally by family members who needed somewhere quiet to disappear. Joseph emerged from the house as we climbed out of the car. He was 38, stocky where Franco was lean, with the same dark eyes but a softer expression. Behind him came a woman who had to be Camilla, visibly pregnant even beneath the loose cotton dress she wore. "You must be Kayla," Joseph said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, nothing like the careful control Franco maintained in every interaction. "Welcome. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Thank you for letting me stay here. Family helps family." He glanced at Franco with something that looked like concern. "Even when family makes questionable decisions that put innocent people in danger." "Joseph." Franco's voice carried a warning. "What?" "She should know what she's gotten into. What you've dragged her into." Joseph turned back to me. "My cousin thinks he can control everything through force of will and superior planning. He forgets that other people have wills too. And sometimes those wills collide in ways that create casualties." Camilla touched her husband's arm gently. "Inside, please. Let's not have this conversation in the driveway." Her English carried a melodic accent I couldn't place. Brazilian maybe, or Portuguese. She smiled at me, warm and genuine. "I've prepared the guest room. Come, you must be exhausted from the drive." The house's interior matched its exterior, comfortable and lived in rather than showplace perfect. Family photos lined the hallway walls, showing multiple generations of Verzianis in various stages of life. I recognized Franco in several, always slightly apart from the group even as a child, like he'd learned early to maintain distance. The guest room was airy and bright, with windows overlooking fields that stretched toward distant tree lines. A breeze carried the scent of cut grass and something floral I couldn't identify. After 2 months in the financial district apartment, with its recycled air and filtered light, the openness felt almost disorienting. "Stay as long as you need," Camilla said, setting fresh towels on the dresser. "Joseph and I are here if you want company, and there's plenty of space if you need solitude. 8 months pregnant means I understand the value of both." "Thank you." I sat on the bed, testing the mattress. "When are you due?" 3 weeks, give or take. My doctor wants me to take it easy, which is why we're here instead of Miami. She placed a hand on her rounded stomach. "This little one is already stubborn like his father." "It's a boy?" "We think so, though we wanted to be surprised. Joseph insists he can tell by the way I'm carrying." She laughed, a sound that made the room feel warmer. Men always think they know everything about pregnancy, despite never experiencing it themselves. After Camilla left, I unpacked the few belongings I'd brought. The clothes from the apartment closet, toiletries, my phone with its limited contacts and heavily monitored usage. Everything I owned that mattered fit in a single duffel bag. The realization was simultaneously depressing and liberating. Through the window, I could see Franco and Joseph standing near the tree line, their conversation animated enough that body language conveyed tension even without hearing words. Joseph gestured emphatically while Franco maintained his characteristic stillness, absorbing rather than reacting. Finally, Joseph threw his hands up and walked back toward the house, leaving Franco alone staring into the forest. I found Camilla in the kitchen preparing lunch, her movements efficient despite her pregnancy. "Can I help?" "Of course. There's salad ingredients in the refrigerator if you'd like to start on that." We worked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Camilla spoke again. "Franco cares for you very much. Joseph says he's never seen his cousin like this with anyone." My hands stilled over the tomatoes I was slicing. "It's complicated." "Love usually is." She smiled at my startled expression. "I'm not saying that's what this is necessarily. Only that complications are normal when strong emotions are involved. Joseph and I met during the worst time of his life. His father had just died. Franco had just taken over the business. Everything was chaos. But somehow we found each other in that chaos and built something real." "Franco's uncle?" "Antonio's brother, yes. A good man who wanted nothing to do with the family business. He moved to Brazil to escape it, which is where I met him. When he passed, Joseph came back to help Franco stabilize things." She paused in her chopping. "My husband thinks his cousin takes too many risks, protects too many people, but I think Franco simply cannot bear to fail anyone after watching his father fail so spectacularly." The insight felt true in a way that made my chest tighten. Franco did carry himself like someone who'd seen failure's cost and refused to repeat it regardless of personal expense. Lunch was tense despite Camilla's efforts to keep conversation light. Joseph clearly disapproved of Franco involving me in his war with the cartel, though he directed his frustration at his cousin rather than me. Franco responded with patience that looked like it cost him, explaining again the necessity of keeping me hidden until the immediate threat passed. "And how long will that be?" Joseph demanded. "Another week? Another month? You've been saying the situation is temporary for 2 years now. This is different. They're escalating, which means they're either preparing for something big or getting desperate. Either way, it will come to a head soon. And when it does? What happens to Kayla if you're wrong about controlling the outcome?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, because there was no good answer. Franco's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That night, I lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to sounds I'd forgotten existed. Crickets, wind through trees, the distant call of some night bird. After weeks of city noise filtered through triple-paned windows, the natural symphony felt almost overwhelming. Sleep came in fits and starts, my mind too active to settle. A soft knock on the door around midnight made me sit up. "Come in." Franco entered carrying 2 mugs that steamed in the moonlight filtering through the windows. "I saw your light on. Thought you might want tea." "Couldn't sleep. Rarely do anymore." He handed me 1 mug and settled into the chair by the window. Too many variables to track. Too many potential threats to anticipate. Joseph's worried about you. Joseph has the luxury of worry. I have the responsibility of action. He sipped his tea. He's not wrong, though. I should have handled this differently from the beginning. Should have refused to let you on the yacht that night. Or at least made sure you stayed inside during the storm. You can't control everything, Franco. Sometimes bad things just happen. Maybe. But I can control my response to them. He set down his mug. Tomorrow I need to go back to Miami for meetings. I'll be gone 2 days, possibly 3. Joseph's security team will be here, and the property is more defensible than the apartment despite appearances. Fear spiked through me at the thought of him leaving. Is it about the cartel? It's about ending this situation so you can go home. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from him. I'm tired of watching you live like a prisoner. Tired of knowing every day I can't give you back your life is another day I failed to fix what I broke. You didn't break anything. You saved me. And in doing so, made you a target. His hand found mine in the darkness. Kayla, if this goes wrong, if something happens to me before I can resolve things with the cartel, Joseph has instructions. Money, security arrangements, everything you'll need to disappear and build a new life somewhere safe. He'll make sure your mother is protected, that Megan and her fiancé are insulated from any fallout. Don't talk like that. Like you're planning your own funeral. I'm planning for contingencies. That's different. But something in his voice suggested it wasn't as different as he claimed. Promise me you'll let Joseph help if it comes to that. Don't try to be brave or independent. Just take what's offered and run. Franco, he kissed me, sudden and desperate and nothing like the careful control he'd maintained over the past weeks. It was need and fear and goodbye all compressed into a single moment. I responded without thinking, my hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. That was not taking it slow, I whispered. No. He pulled back slightly. I should go. Before I do something else we'll both regret. But neither of us moved. The space between us felt charged, crackling with tension that had been building since that first dinner at Lucia's. Maybe since he'd pulled me from dark water and decided I was worth saving. Stay, I said. Not to sleep. Just stay. He did. We talked until dawn, painted the windows gold. About futures that might never exist and pasts that weighed too heavy. About his fear of becoming his father, and my fear of disappearing into invisibility again. About hope and its terrible cost when the world refused cooperation. When light finally forced the night to retreat, Franco kissed my forehead and stood. I have to go. But I'll be back. That's a promise. I watched him leave. Watched the car disappear down the gravel drive, carrying him back toward danger I could only imagine. Camilla found me an hour later, still sitting by the window. He'll come back, she said gently. Franco always comes back. I wanted to believe her. But belief required faith, and faith required forgetting how easily people disappeared when violence wrote its stories. The attack came at dawn on the 6th day after Franco left. I was helping Camilla prepare breakfast when the security system chimed, not the gentle notification of someone approaching, but the harsh blare that meant perimeter breach. Joseph appeared in the kitchen doorway, already on his phone. His expression locked into something hard that made him suddenly resemble Franco more than I'd noticed before. "Take Camilla to the bunker. Now." "What's happening?" Camilla's hand went instinctively to her swollen belly. "Now, Kayla." Joseph's voice carried absolute authority. He pulled a handgun from somewhere beneath his shirt and moved toward the living room windows. I grabbed Camilla's arm, pulling her toward the hallway where Joseph had shown me the panic room entrance on my second day here. A section of wall that looked solid opened with hidden hinges, revealing a reinforced steel door behind it. Camilla's breathing had gone shallow, panic making her stumble. "It's okay," I lied, punching in the code Joseph had made me memorize. "We're safe. This place was built for exactly this." The door opened onto stairs leading down into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on automatically as we descended, illuminating a space about the size of my old apartment. Medical supplies lined one wall, weapons another, food and water enough for weeks stacked neatly on industrial shelving. A bank of monitors showed camera feeds from around the property. "Oh, God," Camilla whispered, staring at the screens. 8 men moved through the perimeter in coordinated patterns. They wore dark tactical gear, faces covered, moving with military precision, not random criminals or opportunistic thieves. This was planned, professional, designed to overwhelm any defense. On screen 3, I watched Joseph take position behind the kitchen counter, 2 security personnel flanking him at different angles. The odds were 3 against 8, and even I could calculate how badly that math worked out. "Joseph," Camilla breathed, her hand pressed against the screen showing her husband. "Please be smart. Please just let them take whatever they want." But they didn't want things. They wanted me. The first shots came through the living room windows, glass exploding inward in crystalline showers. Joseph and his team returned fire with controlled bursts, professional and calm. One of the attacking men went down, then another. But the remaining 6 kept advancing, using trees and landscape features for cover. Camilla gasped, doubling over. I caught her as she nearly fell. "What's wrong?" "Contractions." She breathed through gritted teeth. "Started an hour ago. I thought they were false labor. They're not." Terror spiked through me. "How far apart?" 5 minutes, maybe less now." She straightened as the contraction passed, her face pale. "This can't be happening. Not now. Not like this." Above us, the firefight continued. I watched on the monitors as Joseph's team managed to take down 2 more attackers. But one of the security personnel collapsed, blood spreading across his shoulder. The odds were shifting, and not in our favor. "I need to check you." I guided Camilla to the medical section, pulling out supplies with shaking hands. "Tell me your symptoms." "Everything. Water broke about 20 minutes ago." "I didn't want to worry you with the alarm going off." She lay back on the cot, breathing hard. "The baby shouldn't come yet. It's too early. You're 35 weeks. That's premature but viable with proper care." I pulled on gloves, forcing my training to override the fear clawing at my throat. "But we need to get you to a hospital soon." "Does this look like soon is possible?" She gestured weakly at the monitors where the remaining 4 attackers had breached the house. I could see Joseph falling back, covering the hallway that led to our position. The other security guard was moving, limping but functional. They'd bought us time, but not much. "Can you reach Franco?" Camilla asked through another contraction. I grabbed my phone from my pocket. No signal this deep underground. The bunker blocks everything. That's the point. Then we're on our own. She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Kayla, I need you to promise me something. If it comes down to choosing between me and the baby, you save the baby. Whatever it takes." "That's not going to happen. Promise me." Her eyes held mine, fierce despite the fear. "Joseph needs his son. The family needs him. Promise." Before I could answer, an explosion rocked the bunker. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several monitors went dark. Camilla screamed, more from shock than pain. On the remaining working screens, I saw smoke filling the hallway above us. They were trying to blast their way in. Joseph's voice crackled through a speaker I hadn't noticed. "Kayla, can you hear me?" I found the microphone panel. "We're here. Camilla's in labor." A pause. Then Joseph's voice again, strained now. "How far along?" "Contractions 5 minutes apart. Water broke. This baby's coming whether we want it to or not. Reinforcements are 15 minutes out. Franco's on his way. Can you keep her stable until then?" I looked at Camilla, her face contorted with another contraction. "I'll do everything I can." "Good. Because I'm about to seal the upper entrance. They're not getting through that door. I promise you." The speaker cut off. On the monitors, I watched Joseph and the remaining guard drag something heavy across the hallway. Seconds later, another explosion. This one muffled by whatever they'd positioned as a barrier. "Kayla." Camilla's voice pulled my attention back. "I need to push." "Not yet. It's too soon. You're not fully dilated." "I don't care what I am. This baby is coming now." I checked her again, my heart sinking at what I found. She was right. 8 centimeters and progressing fast. The stress, the adrenaline, the sheer terror of the situation had accelerated everything. Okay. I positioned her as best I could on the narrow cot, pulling out towels and clamps and everything else I might need from the medical supplies. "We're doing this, you and me. But you have to listen to everything I say." For the next 20 minutes, nothing existed except Camilla's breathing and my instructions, and the primal work of bringing life into a world actively trying to take it. Above us, the sounds of combat faded to occasional thuds and muffled shouts. I couldn't spare attention for the monitors or worry about Joseph or wonder if Franco would arrive in time. All that mattered was the baby crowning, then emerging in a rush of fluid and blood and the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. A cry, thin but strong, announcing his arrival with indignant fury. "It's a boy," I said unnecessarily, tears streaming down my face as I cleared his airways and clamped the cord with trembling hands. "Camilla, you have a son." She reached for him with shaking arms, and I placed the tiny, squalling infant against her chest. He was small, maybe 5 pounds, covered in vernix and blood and absolutely perfect. His lungs worked, his limbs moved, his eyes opened to show dark pupils searching for his mother's face. "Hello, baby," Camilla whispered, her own tears mixing with mine. "Hello, my beautiful boy." A massive impact shook the bunker. The reinforced door buckled but held. Then another impact. Metal screaming under stress but not breaking. "They're not stopping," I said, wrapping the baby in the cleanest towel I could find. "We need to move to the back of the bunker." I helped Camilla stand, supporting her weight while she clutched her newborn son. We retreated to the farthest corner, behind the shelving units, making ourselves as small as possible. I found a handgun in the weapons cabinet, checked that it was loaded even though I'd never fired one in my life. If they got through that door, I'd figure it out. The impact stopped. Silence stretched, broken only by the baby's whimpering and Camilla's labored breathing. On the one working monitor, I could see only smoke and darkness. Then the speaker crackled again. "Kayla, it's Franco. Open the door." Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees buckled. "How do I know it's really you?" "Because I'm the idiot who pulled you out of a hurricane and changed both our lives forever. Now open this door before I tear it off its hinges." I stumbled to the control panel, punching in the release code with shaking fingers. The locks disengaged with heavy clicks. The door swung open to reveal Franco, covered in blood that might have been his or someone else's, flanked by a dozen armed men in tactical gear. His eyes found me first, scanning for injury, then moved to Camilla holding her newborn in the corner. "Is everyone okay?" "The baby came early. Camilla needs a hospital. Joseph is alive. Injured but alive." Franco moved into the bunker, and despite everything, despite the blood and violence and chaos, his hand was gentle when it touched my face. "You did well. You kept them safe. I delivered a baby in a bunker while people tried to kill us. I don't think well covers it." "No." He pulled me against his chest, and I could feel his heart hammering beneath the tactical vest. "Extraordinary. That's the word." Paramedics arrived minutes later, swarming the bunker with stretchers and equipment. They took Camilla and her son first. Then Joseph, who'd been shot twice but had somehow stayed conscious and fighting until Franco's reinforcements arrived. Of the 8 attackers, 5 were dead, 3 captured and already being interrogated somewhere I didn't want to know about. Franco wouldn't let me go, even when the paramedics wanted to check me for injuries, even when police arrived to take statements. His hand stayed locked around mine like letting go meant losing me forever. "It's over," he said, as dawn broke over the property, painting the destruction in shades of gold. "They made their move, and they failed. Now we finish this." I looked at the bullet holes in the house walls, the blood-staining gravel, the broken windows and scorched wood. Looked at the man beside me who'd orchestrated violence to protect what he'd claimed as his. What happens now? Now you stay alive. Now that baby grows up safe. Now we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. He turned to face me fully. And now you decide if you can live with what it takes to make that promise real. The choice stretched before me, clear and terrible and somehow inevitable. Walk away from this world of blood and bullets, or stay and accept that safety always came with a cost. I looked at the bunker entrance where Camilla had given birth in darkness while war raged above. Thought about the tiny life that had entered the world screaming defiance at death itself. "I already decided," I told Franco. "The moment I promised to keep them safe. I'm staying." His expression held relief and regret in equal measure. "You shouldn't have to." "Maybe not, but here we are anyway." Key West at sunset looked like something from a postcard. All golden light and turquoise water and buildings painted in colors that would look garish anywhere else but somehow worked here. Franco had chosen the location carefully. Neutral territory where none of the major players held absolute control, where agreements made had to be honored because violating them meant losing access to one of the few spaces where business could happen without immediate bloodshed. The resort was small, exclusive, the kind of place that catered to people who valued discretion over ostentation. We'd arrived 2 hours early, giving Franco's security team time to sweep the entire property. I watched from our suite window as they moved through gardens and checked rooftops, invisible to casual observers but unmistakable to anyone looking for them. "You don't have to come to the meeting," Franco said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. He'd dressed carefully for this. Suit charcoal gray, shirt white, everything calculated to project power without aggression. "You can stay here where it's safe. We've established that nowhere is actually safe." I turned from the window. "Besides, you said my presence matters, that it shows you have something to lose beyond territory and profit." "It does, but that makes you a vulnerability they'll notice and potentially exploit. Then they'll exploit it. But I'm coming anyway." I'd chosen my own outfit with equal care, a wine-colored dress that Joseph's wife Camilla had helped me select before we left. Professional but not corporate, elegant but not flashy. The kind of thing that said I belonged without demanding attention. Franco studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay close. If anything feels wrong, you leave immediately. No arguments, no heroics. You run." Agreed. The meeting took place in a private dining room overlooking the water. Franco and I arrived first, along with 2 of his security team who positioned themselves at strategic points. Within 10 minutes, representatives from the Cartel del Golfo filtered in. 3 men in expensive suits who carried themselves with the confidence of people used to being feared. They greeted Franco with careful respect, acknowledging me with brief nods that assessed and catalogued without lingering. The final group to arrive was from the O'Sullivan family, the Irish organization that controlled Jacksonville's port operations. 2 men, one older with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, the other younger but carrying the same watchful intensity. They shook Franco's hand with the ease of people who'd done business before, though I noticed neither side relaxed their guard. "Gentlemen," Franco began once everyone was seated, "thank you for coming. We're here because the Cartel de Sinaloa has forced a situation that affects all of our interests. Their attempt to seize control of Miami's port operations through violence threatens the stability we've all worked to maintain." The older O'Sullivan, who'd introduced himself as Patrick, leaned back in his chair. "We heard about the attack on your cousin's property. Casualties on both sides, I'm told. 8 of theirs, 2 of mine injured. They also inadvertently helped deliver my cousin's son 3 weeks early." Franco's voice remained neutral, but I heard the steel underneath. "They've demonstrated they're willing to escalate beyond acceptable boundaries. That makes them everyone's problem." One of the Cartel del Golfo representatives, a man named Rojas, spoke carefully. Sinaloa's aggression in Florida has disrupted supply chains we depend on. Their willingness to ignore established territories threatens our own operations. We have no love for them. Which is why I'm proposing an alliance, Franco continued. Not permanent, not binding beyond this specific situation, but coordinated pressure from 3 directions simultaneously. They can't fight all of us at once, and they know it. Patrick O'Sullivan's sharp eyes moved to me briefly. And what's her role in this? Forgive my directness, but you don't usually bring civilians to business meetings. Kayla is here because Sinaloa made her a target when they couldn't break my operations through conventional means. She represents why we're having this conversation. They've moved beyond professional boundaries into territory none of us can tolerate. Something in the way Franco said it made the room's temperature shift. The other men exchanged glances, recognizing the implicit message. Attack my people, and you attack principles we all theoretically share. Even in their world, some lines supposedly weren't crossed. What exactly are you proposing? Rojas asked. For the next hour, they discussed logistics with the kind of clinical efficiency that made my stomach turn. Not violence explicitly, but pressure points and leverage and coordinated actions that would strangle Sinaloa's operations in Florida without requiring overt warfare. The Cartel del Golfo would block their Mexican supply routes. The O'Sullivans would deny them access to northern ports. Franco would maintain his stranglehold on Miami, while quietly ensuring that every legitimate shipment Sinaloa tried to move got delayed, inspected, or mysteriously rerouted. They'll have to negotiate or leave, Franco said. Those are their only options if we execute this correctly. And if they choose to escalate further? The younger O'Sullivan asked. Then we respond in kind, but with 3 organizations backing the response instead of 1. They're not stupid. They'll read the math and understand they've lost. Patrick O'Sullivan studied Franco for a long moment. You've changed since your father's time. Antonio would have responded to their attack with immediate retaliation. You're choosing strategy over vengeance. My grandfather taught me that lasting solutions come from thinking 3 moves ahead, not from satisfying immediate anger. Franco's voice held quiet respect when he mentioned Luca. Antonio forgot that lesson. I won't. The negotiation continued through dinner, a meal I barely tasted despite its obvious quality. I sat beside Franco, silent as agreed, watching the careful dance of men who dealt in violence discussing how to avoid it through superior positioning. It should have horrified me, and part of it did, but another part, the part that had watched Camilla give birth while explosions rocked the bunker above us, understood the necessity of what they were arranging. By the time dessert arrived, they'd reached agreement. Specific territories, specific actions, specific timelines. Everything documented carefully in language that sounded almost legitimate until you understood what the euphemisms actually meant. One more thing, Franco said, as the meeting prepared to adjourn. This arrangement protects all of us, but it also means we're vouching for each other's integrity. If one of us violates the terms or uses the distraction to move on the other's territories, the alliance becomes an immediate liability. Are you questioning our word? Rojas's voice carried an edge. I'm clarifying that my word is iron, and I expect the same from everyone at this table. Franco met each man's eyes in turn. We all benefit from Sinaloa's retreat. We all lose if we turn on each other the moment the pressure eases. I need to know everyone here understands that. Patrick O'Sullivan nodded slowly. My family doesn't break agreements. Our reputation depends on it. Nor does mine. Rojas agreed. You have our word. They shook hands, sealed deals with centuries of bloody tradition behind them, and dispersed into the Key West night. Franco and I remained in the dining room after they'd left, alone except for security personnel positioned at careful distances. It's done, Franco said quietly. Sinaloa will receive notification of the alliance within hours. They'll have 72 hours to make a decision. And if they choose violence, then we end this permanently. But they won't. They're businessmen underneath everything else. They'll negotiate terms for withdrawal that let them save face, and everyone moves on with minimal casualties. He turned to face me. You did well tonight. Staying quiet. Observing. Some of those men were testing me by watching you, seeing if you'd react inappropriately or demonstrate weakness. I'm not weak. No. His hand found mine beneath the table. You're extraordinarily strong. Stronger than I had any right to expect when I pulled you from that water. We stayed in Key West overnight, returning to Miami the next afternoon. The city looked different somehow. Familiar streets carrying new weight now that I understood what happened in the spaces between buildings. Franco took me back to the financial district apartment rather than his own home, maintaining the careful separation he'd established weeks ago. I need to be at the port for the next few days, he explained, making sure everything we discussed gets implemented correctly. You'll be safest here with the security we've already established. When will I know if it worked? 72 hours. They'll respond within that time frame or they won't, and either way we'll have our answer. He left, and I was alone again with my thoughts, and the city spread out below. The agreement felt surreal, like I'd witnessed something from a movie rather than actual life. But the bandage still on Joseph's shoulder where he'd been shot was real. The tiny baby fighting in the NICU, born 3 weeks early because violence had forced his entrance into the world, was real. All of it real. All of it the cost of being connected to Franco Versiani. Megan called that evening, the first time we'd spoken in almost 2 weeks. Jake told me some things, she said carefully, about what happened at the property, about the baby. Are you okay? Physically, yes. Otherwise, I'm not sure. Do you want to leave? Because Jake said he could arrange something. Get you somewhere safe. Somewhere away from all this. The offer hung between us. Genuine and tempting, and ultimately impossible. I can't leave now. Not after everything that's happened. Not when it's almost over. Almost over isn't the same as over. Her voice held the kind of worry I remembered from college, when I'd dated badly and made questionable choices, and she'd been the voice of reason. Kayla, this isn't your world. You don't have to stay in it just because you got pulled into it temporarily. What if it's not temporary anymore? What if I chose this? A long silence. Then I hope you know what you're choosing, and I hope he's worth it. After we hung up, I stood at the window watching lights flicker on across the city. Somewhere out there, messages were being delivered, pressure being applied, the machinery of Franco's coalition grinding into motion. In 72 hours, I'd know if I'd bet my future on the right man, or if everything would collapse under the weight of violence neither of us could fully control. But for tonight, in this expensive cage that no longer felt quite so confining, I chose to believe that sometimes impossible things worked out, that sometimes falling into dark water led to finding something worth drowning for. The city glittered below, indifferent to the wars fought in its shadows, and I made my peace with becoming part of those shadows, at least until the dawn. 6 months after falling from Franco's yacht into hurricane waters, I stood in the neonatal intensive care unit, watching Joseph and Camilla's son sleep peacefully in his mother's arms. He'd spent 5 weeks here after his dramatic entrance into the world, but now weighed a healthy 7 pounds and was finally going home. Thank you, Camilla said for the dozenth time since I'd arrived, for everything you did that day. The doctor said if you hadn't kept me stable, if you hadn't managed the delivery so well, we might have lost him. You did all the hard work, I replied, though the memory of delivering a baby while explosions shook the bunker above still woke me some nights. I just helped. You saved my family. Joseph appeared in the doorway, his shoulder healed, but still carrying a slight stiffness from where the bullet had torn through muscle. That makes you family, Kayla. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, the Versiani family is yours. The words carried weight in their world, binding promises that transcended simple gratitude. I'd learned enough over these months to understand what that kind of declaration meant. After leaving them to prepare for discharge, I drove through Miami streets that had become familiar again. The Cartel de Sinaloa had negotiated their withdrawal within the 72-hour deadline, choosing survival over pride. They'd retreated to Texas operations, leaving Miami's port under Franco's control, alongside the careful alliance he'd built with the Cartel del Golfo and the O'Sullivan family. The war hadn't ended cleanly, but it had ended, and that counted for something. I'd returned to work at Miami General 2 months ago, initially just part-time shifts while I rebuilt stamina and confidence. My colleagues asked careful questions about my medical leave, and I gave carefully vague answers about a concussion and complications from an accident. Most seemed to accept it, A few clearly suspected more but knew better than to push. The apartment in the financial district sat empty now. I'd moved into a place of my own last month, nothing as luxurious but mine in ways that mattered. Franco had tried to argue that I should stay somewhere with better security, but I'd held firm. If I was building a life that belonged to me, it needed to start with space that was truly mine. My mother in Oregon didn't know the details of what had happened in Miami. She just heard my voice grow steadier every time we spoke. For the first time since my father's diagnosis, the bills hanging over her life didn't feel like a noose I had to outrun with overtime. Megan's wedding had happened 3 weeks ago, a beautiful ceremony where I'd stood as maid of honor and watched my best friend marry Jake, despite his connections to Franco's world. She'd made her choice, just as I'd made mine. We understood each other better now. Two women who'd chosen complicated men and accepted the costs that came with those choices. My phone buzzed with a text from Franco. Dinner tonight? Your place or neutral territory? We'd been navigating this carefully, rebuilding our relationship outside the pressure cooker of immediate danger. Some days it worked. Some days the weight of what we'd been through made normal conversation impossible. But we kept trying, kept choosing each other despite how much easier it would be to walk away. My place, I texted back. 7 o'clock. Bring wine. The evening air carried hints of autumn when Franco arrived exactly at 7, bottle of wine in hand, and that careful control still evident in every movement. But when I opened the door, his expression softened into something that looked almost like peace. Your place is nice, he said, looking around my modest apartment with its secondhand furniture and walls I'd painted myself. It suits you better than the financial district. It's mine. That makes it perfect. I took the wine and gestured toward the kitchen where I'd been attempting to cook something that wasn't hospital cafeteria food or expensive restaurant meals. I hope you like pasta. It's pretty much all I know how to make. I love pasta. He loosened his tie, becoming marginally less the dangerous businessman, and more just a man who looked tired. Joseph told me you visited today. Baby's finally going home. Camilla looks happy. She is. They both are. He accepted the wine glass I poured and settled onto my thrift store couch. They also told me what Joseph said to you. About being family. He was being generous. He was being accurate. Franco's dark eyes held mine. You're part of this now, Kayla. Not because you were forced into it, but because you chose it. Chose us. That means something in our world. Does it mean I get a vote in family business decisions? I asked, only half joking. It means your voice matters when it should. That you're protected not as a courtesy but as a right. That the resources of the Vertiani family are yours if you need them. He paused. It also means you're held to certain expectations. Loyalty. Discretion. Understanding that some things can't be discussed even with people you trust. I sat beside him, close, but not touching. I know. I've been living that reality for months now. And you're still here. I'm still here, I confirmed. Though some days I'm not sure if that's brave or stupid. Both, probably. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together with familiar ease. I never wanted this for you. Never wanted to drag you into my world and watch you have to adapt to its darkness. You didn't drag me. I fell, remember? You just happened to catch me. I squeezed his hand. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you did. Even with everything that came after. We ate dinner sitting on my small balcony overlooking a neighborhood that was nowhere near as glamorous as the financial district, but felt infinitely more real. Talked about mundane things like work schedules and family obligations, and the book I'd been reading. Normal conversation from two people whose relationship had been forged in crisis, but was learning to exist in peace. Later, after the wine was finished and the sun had set over Miami's skyline, Franco pulled me close on the couch. I love you, he said simply. No drama or grand gestures. Just truth laid bare. I've loved you since you questioned my decisions about taking you to that apartment. Since you showed courage I had no right to expect. I know it's complicated. I know I come with baggage that could crush most people. But I love you anyway. My throat tightened with emotion I'd been holding back for weeks. I love you too. Even though you're dangerous and controlling and you made decisions about my life without asking. Especially because of those things? He asked with a ghost of a smile. Maybe in spite of them. I kissed him, soft and slow, tasting wine and possibility. But yes, I love you, the real you, not the version you show the world. The man who jumped into a hurricane for someone he barely knew, who protects his family with everything he has, who's trying to be better than his father despite how hard that is. I'll never be completely legitimate, he warned. There will always be shadows in my business, choices I make that you won't agree with. I know. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm just asking you to let me choose this life with full knowledge of what it means. No more protection through ignorance. If I'm part of this family, I need to understand what that actually entails. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. No more hiding the difficult parts. But that means you'll see things that might change how you feel about me. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But I'd rather know the truth and struggle with it than live in comfortable lies. We stayed on the couch until midnight, talking through details he'd kept from me before. Not everything. He made clear. Some information was too dangerous to share, but enough that I understood the scope of his operations. The careful balance he maintained between legitimate business and the illegal enterprises he couldn't fully separate from yet. It was ugly and complicated and sometimes morally reprehensible, and I chose it anyway. Chose him anyway. Because the alternative was walking away from the person who'd saved my life, and then taught me how to live it on my own terms again. When Franco left, he kissed me at the door with the kind of intensity that promised future returns. I'll call you tomorrow. We have dinner with Joseph and Camilla this weekend. Official welcome home for the baby. I'll be there. After he left, I stood in my apartment surrounded by furniture I'd picked and walls I'd painted, feeling more settled than I had in years. This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was paying off my father's medical bills and dreaming of graduate school, but it was mine. Built from choices I'd made with eyes open to their consequences. My phone buzzed with a final text from Franco. Thank you for choosing me, even when I gave you every reason not to. I typed back, thank you for being worth choosing, even when you're impossible. Outside my window, Miami glittered with the same indifferent beauty it always had. Somewhere in that sprawl of light and shadow, people were making deals and fighting wars and building empires on foundations of blood and money. Franco was part of that world, would always be part of it. But he was also the man who'd risked his life for mine, who'd protected people he barely knew, because it was the right thing to do, who was trying, however imperfectly, to be better than his legacy demanded. That man was worth the complications, worth the dangers, worth building a life that balanced light and shadow in equal measure. I turned off the lights and went to bed in my own apartment, in my own life, chosen with full knowledge of its costs. And for the first time since falling into dark water 6 months ago, I slept without nightmares of drowning.